Welcome, Kylie.
Thank you very much for having me, Karen.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. I love what you've done. It's, I think that I don't think that people understand the trauma, of living through a bushfire or living close to it, or just we see it on the news, and it's really traumatic. And I guess if you're living through it, those sort of, I guess the triggers, never seem to go away, and it's particularly worse for the kids. And I think that, just anything like what you've done, anything that can help the kids is absolutely massive. So you've written this book, but I want to talk about the book in a minute, but you've got a long history before that. But I think the most important thing, the thing that, I'm so interested in is you were doing journalism and living in the city and all that kind of stuff that people do. And then you hit this point where it's a tree change, and so moving to Phillip, I know you've moved to Phillip Island in 2010, and what made you move to East Gippsland? You kind of like put yourself straight in the fire zone, didn't you?
Well, I think at the time that I moved, I was living at the time with someone who didn't want to live in the city anymore, and I had a very, very urban existence. I lived probably the most urban of existences. I loved my food and wine festivals. I loved going to the cinema, and I loved pub music and all of those sorts of things. I was living in Elwood and working at The Age and then the Herald Sun, so I had a long career in journalism. And I left basically, I guess it was a compromise to go to Phillip Island. It was close enough to the city that I could still go up there for work and for meetings and to do the things that I love to do. But within a year, we basically figured out that we didn't really want to go up to the city anymore. And I'd set up a way for myself to work remotely, so therefore it didn't really matter. I had a family connection at the time up around the Gippsland Lakes, and so came up here quite a lot for weekends and to visit, and fell in love with it basically, and ended up finding a really great place to live near the lakes. And yeah, there was no going back. Now I really struggle to go to Melbourne even for a weekend, even though I do with my friends. I well and truly became, the country girl. I loved it. Got the chooks, got the veggie garden, the whole works within a heartbeat of moving here.
Yeah, it's once you taste it, you don't want to go back.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And so when you moved to East Gippsland, you moved to I'm gonna get this wrong, but I'm gonna have a crack. Wairua, is that right?
We bought a place in Wairua, so it's 10-acre hobby farm. It's the little dream pocket, as far as I'm concerned. The Wairua Valley is just off the highway between Nawa and Orbost, and it's just this beautiful little pocket of East Gippsland, really. Unfortunately, it was right in the path of the bushfires in the summer of 2019-20, so that was a bit unfortunate.
When you moved to East Gippsland, were you thinking about that sort of stuff? Did that cross your mind and think, maybe we shouldn't live up here just because of that? No,
I think I didn't even consider it. And to be honest, it wouldn't change the way I think now either, I don't think. I think I grew up on the far south coast of New South Wales, and lived on a property in the bush in Tanja, which is between Tathra and Bermagui, and we experienced fires as kids on multiple occasions, and in fact Dad was in the local fire brigade. So I think I'm very mindful that there's risk when you choose to live the way we do. We just do everything we can to minimise the risk, I guess. Like, we're very fire savvy, and we were very lucky because we didn't lose our house during those fires. A lot of people did. Through no fault of their own or through no great doing by us either, I have to say. I mean, I think in this fire season it was all about luck.
Yeah.
As we discovered, they're bigger and more ferocious than I remember as a child.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of you have this imagination, if you've never experienced one, that it's just sort of, it's like your bonfire in your backyard, and it only sits about 10 foot tall and comes through slowly, but it's it's higher than, like, I'm just looking at now at my gum trees, and they'd have to be 200 foot, 300 foot tall, and it just barrels over the top of them at a raging speed. And I think it's just, I think it's unimaginable unless you actually experience it. And like you say, I don't think anybody could have done anything better than they did, to save their homes. And it's so tragic.
I know. Look, it was really tragic, and we weren't at our property the night of the fires. Our next door neighbour is the captain of the Wairua Fire Brigade, and obviously lots of our neighbours also stayed to defend. So we did hear about what it was like. It was the middle of the night. There were 100-kilometre-an-hour winds. Our property was one of the first that was hit by a spot fire. We didn't really have trees there. It was the middle of farmland. So there was just nothing that anyone could do. I think they were battling spot fires all over the place within minutes in the middle of the night. Yeah. And in the end, it wasn't about saving property. It was about saving lives, because it was so fast and so deadly. Yeah. So, it was really unprecedented. I know that's a terrible word. We all hate unprecedented, but I think it just was.
It was. Yeah. It was. I remember when we had the 2009, I think, the big Black Saturday fires, and it's I was in Trafalgar, and there was ash coming. There were actually big balls of hay band flying through the sky from about 40 kilometres away, and they were landing on my property, causing spot fires. And it was just, you can't even fathom in your brain, how can that actually still be a light coming from that far away? The heat in the air was just so intense. And
we went up days before the fire to get a whole lot of, because we'd evacuated most of the valuables from the property, and all the animals had been taken, not our own animals, our neighbours, that all, we knew there was a fairly big risk, even though we didn't think that our property would be affected. And even then there were black leaves all over the very dead grass. Remembering, of course, we're in the middle of a very long drought too, so the country was very dry. Yeah. And there were blackened leaves that had been blown over from, up past Buchan somewhere, a long way away. It wasn't, we even were sort of having conversations about, could this be fire damage or not? Because the fire wasn't actually that close. But clearly it was just the winds were, next level. Yeah,
it's so powerful. I think, it's you get distraught watching the TV, but to actually experience it. I mean, we're only an hour away. We're probably 50 minutes from where the closest one was. We still, it actually, I've talked about this on a lot of my episodes. It was the inspiration for starting this podcast, because I felt so bloody helpless and so stressed, that it actually knocked me off my perch, and I've never been knocked off my perch before, but, and I couldn't help. And, I felt like everywhere I went to help, there was like, no, we don't need it. We don't need it. We don't need it. So my answer to it was to start a podcast, because, I can inspire other people to help. So maybe even if I can't help, other people can be helping in all sorts of places all around the world. But your property had, and your response was to write a book, which we'll get into in a very short second. You had all these lime trees, like a little orchard on your farm. That's significant.
We had one of the reasons that we fell in love with the property before we bought it was that it had established orchards. The guy that we sold it, that we bought it off, had studied, basically fruit growing. He was a agricultural forester or something like that. Yeah. So he had planted a whole lot of, most of them were rare breed trees, heritage fruit trees and things like that. Mm-hmm. He used to make booze actually out of it. So apples and pears, which I think that was probably what got the property over the line with my partner. He has this vision of, a still producing all sorts of amazing fruit alcohol. But unfortunately, that was the area. One of the orchards was fine down the bottom. That's got all the apples and pears, but the other orchard with all the citrus and olives and other things, that actually got torched. It was right where the fire was hottest. So we weren't able to save any of those trees. I think 2 survived actually that have come back, 2 lemons. But that was a really emotional thing in particular for me, because where we had plans for a house and all the rest of it, that was right up there next to that orchard, and it changed everything, because the few trees that we had and the view, the aspect, everything that we loved about that property kind of got burnt, really. And it was all those things. I remember writing in a social post at the time, it was the intangibles for us. Yes, we lost fencing and tanks and infrastructure, but really it was the old wooden fence that was out the front that was covered in lichen. It was the great big tree that the kookaburras used to sit in. And, it was all of those things. And the fruit trees in particular, for me, I was really gutted, because I like cooking. I had been collecting the citrus and making marmalades. We had a couple of great big quince trees, and so I'd made, 10 times my body weight in quince paste the previous year, things like, and which all went mouldy, unfortunately. That was a whole other story. Weeks of work wasted. But I really was I was gutted by that loss. And one of the stories that we tell in Heroes of Black Summer is actually my story, because, and telling this always makes me cry, but after the fires, I went down to Now and Now General Store, which is the closest shop to our property, and Sandra Huggins, who runs the store, told me that a local, I think a stranger actually, had come into the shop and bought a bottle of water with $50 and told her that he wanted to donate it. And that was really soon after the fires. And so she didn't want to take it for herself. So she set up a pay it forward scheme from the Now and Now General Store. And then everyone that had lost stuff in the fire basically then got it for free. So the store would give things. In my case, I went in to just get some water because we had no drinking water. We'd lost all of our tanks and so forth. So I went in to get some water, and there was a lime tree out the front. Because I'd lost the citrus orchard, I bought it and went to buy it, and Sandra gave it to me as part of the pay it forward scheme. And I think I burst into tears, and I've probably burst into tears every time talking about it since. And it took me about 6 months to plant the lime tree. I kept it in its pot and kept watering it because I was worried that I just was really worried that something would happen to it. That, to me, was the symbol of life and renewal and hope. And when we did eventually plant it, we then went into lockdown and I couldn't water it. So my little next door neighbour, Sam, who's 6, used to climb over the fence with a bucket and water the lime tree for us. And now it's thriving, although it's a little bit surrounded by kikuyu. It needs a bit of a trim. Yes, so that little lime tree is basically, for me, everything that is new about our property. I love it. It means a lot.
And for anyone, if you have a look at the picture on the website, that's the picture of Kylie holding that lime tree. But you're talking about, it's cumulative grief, isn't it? It's all those little things. It's like, oh, the fence is gone, and then you just recover, you just get your breath back, and you think, oh, the tree's gone with the kookaburras, and then it's like, oh, I think it's just this never-ending series of, and there are people, way worse than what you experience. It's kind of like, losing their house and losing all their stock, and it's like, oh, that's gone. Oh, I'll never get that back. And I think we underestimate that the impact it has on your body, mind, and soul. Just those constant, all the time. And I don't think it ever goes away. I don't think it ever clears up.
We still don't really know some of the things that we lost, because the side of our shed was burnt and the contents of it were burned beyond recognition. So it was a bit of a guessing game, like, what was that? And it's only every now and again, someone will say, oh, where's the esky? Oh, that must have been the esky, that black heap or whatever it is, and And it's quite bizarre too, because it was absolutely scorched, really nothing left in the orchard area. And for example, there was and it took me a little while to realise there was a composter there. I didn't even find any melted black plastic. Like, it was just completely gone, you know. Look, in our case, we were really lucky because most of the stuff, you know, we didn't lose a house. A lot of people did. Unfortunately, at Wairua, half of the houses were lost, and our next door neighbour lost 75 head of cattle too, which is obviously devastating for him and for all of the people that had to deal with that afterwards. And these things I don't think you recover from. And I think everyone's recovering at different rates. But unfortunately, you know, the COVID global pandemic came right on the back of it. So people haven't really had the opportunity to process the trauma from the fires in the way that they probably ordinarily would have, which is also unfortunate. But, you know, that's one of the reasons that we have done this book, because this actually does give children an outlet and an opportunity to see some positives and to talk about it. And, you know, if that brings some good, then that's great. That's all we want.
Yeah. Well, I was just about to ask about that. You know, it's I think that everybody wants to do something, you know, everybody wants to say, well, how can I help myself heal? How can I help the community heal? Seeing, and particularly we saw images on the, you know, TV of the kids at Malakuta on the beach and little kids in boats and, you know, like just standing in the water and that stuff like that. And we've heard, you know, we had Danielle McAlpine on another podcast talking about filming down there, you know, and interviewing, and we've seen all of that sort of stuff. But I think there's still a lot of people that, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? You know, and clearly you were one of them, you know, is what can I do? And I believe you, because you got this background in communications, you were called upon, you know, to I don't know, provide information, and that ended up coming to, hey, tell us how the book eventuated.
I think in my case, because I was a journalist in Melbourne for a lot of years, and at the daily papers, the Age and the Herald Sun, an awful lot of my friends are still in that industry. So obviously when the fires happened, a lot of people were contacting me to find out if I could hook them up with local people that might talk about it. Yeah. Because we were less impacted than others, we didn't lose our house, a lot of people did. Yeah. I was then asked by one of the local organisations if I would talk to some of the media myself so that I could present some face of the experience without further traumatising some of the people that really were frontline loss and damage, you know. So I did a few interviews that way, and one of those was with Craig Schieffer, who visited our property at Wairua with Australian Geographic magazine. So in the course of that, and it was the Australian Geographic that took that photo of me actually at the property with the lime tree. Yeah. In the course of that, Craig's based up in the northeast, and Craig had written a similar children's picture book about Sparky, a little puppy that ran away and then came back after the fires. And Australian Geographic was in the process of publishing that. And he rang me after we had done the story together for the magazine to see whether or not I would be interested in project managing a similar picture book project, and co-writing it with him, because I had obviously a lot of local background and knowledge down here, and he knew I was a writer by profession. So I mean, I think at first, to be honest, I was a little bit reluctant because I was really still in the thick of processing the loss and everything that was going on, and COVID had hit, and you know, I just wasn't quite in the headspace. But I realised that it was probably a really good outlet to do it, and so in the end, we did it, and you know, very gratefully, actually, it's started me on a whole new direction. But it was through my business. I then applied for a grant with Gippsland Primary Health Network, the One Good Community grants, and was lucky enough to get one, which helped cover some of the costs of publishing and the illustrator and so forth. Australian Geographic was on board already. They were very interested in the project. So, so it just really went from there. I mean, Australian Geographic led the publication process, so they secured the illustrator and the editing and all the rest of it. And I started to teach myself about how to write picture books, which I knew nothing about. It turns out it's quite a science and nothing at all like writing speeches for CEOs or features for newspapers.
It is a science, 32 pages. And
So I've subsequently done a children's picture book writing course, and I've just completed a masterclass as well. So
wow.
it's taken me in a whole new direction. I've now written 3 more picture books.
Wow. That's fantastic. Oh, well, see, there you go. You had this hidden career that you didn't even know about. And they often say that, it takes a tragic situation, or it takes it might not always be tragic, but it takes some impactful turn of events, that we end up going, oh my God, I didn't even know this was in me, this whatever it is.
I don't have children, I have nieces and nephews, but mostly I have dogs. Fortunately, they don't mind listening to picture books when I'm reading them out loud to them now. I give them a run.
They're the best audience.
They're the best audience, absolutely. So really, it's been a very steep learning curve, but it was a brilliant, absolutely brilliant creative outlet for me now.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I've found. I'm still working sort of in a corporate and professional world full time, but I'm making sure now that I have at least one day a week where I can focus on some creative stuff, which is, I found it's just brilliant. It's really just helped me get through, I think. And, as difficult as been, the book publicity I've actually found a bit distressing early on. Like, when I started to talk about it, I realised that I, in fact, hadn't processed it at all, and it was a bit traumatizing talking about it all. And to be honest, it wasn't just the loss, it was just the feeling of insecurity. I think what the bushfire has done up here, and probably everywhere in Australia, certainly a lot of places in Australia, it's taken away our sense of stability and our sense of security, and even the sense that we might know what's coming each summer. Like, there's a feeling of dread, I think, that used to exist, at least for me. After the fire came through, we also, strangely enough, had a visit from the Premier and the Police Minister, the Emergency Services Minister, and Andrew Crisp. A whole delegation of senior government people came to visit us and some other properties up around Wairua, just an under the radar visit to see what the community needed. And I remember telling Andrew Crisp that the thing that I most wanted was a different set of ringtones for the emergency app, because I was ready to throw it at the wall, because we spent that entire summer just with the, constant beeping of leave now, or you're too late to leave, or, it really was just relentless. It was all day, every day. And I think my social media feed was full of the same thing, my local friends all sort of stressed out by the, the constant evacuations, because I think, it was 6 times or something over the summer, and a lot more get ready to evacuate, even if we didn't. So
I agree. I was saying the same to my partner, because I've never, ever since 2009, since I dread summer. It's kind of like, oh God, here it comes. So we've got snakes, tons of snakes, and we got the bloody bushfires, and it's constant. You're constantly on high alert. I'd rather slush around in the mud in winter, but it's you're lying in bed, and there's fires. There could be an hour away, but we all know that an hour away fires can be upon you in an hour. It's not like it's that far away, and so all night, you don't want to sleep with your phone beeping, but you don't want to turn it on silent in case something happens. And it's real, and it gets you going every single time it goes off. And I was saying to her, why don't they have a text a text or something, you know, or something that rings, you know, that you have to answer, this is emergency, get out, you know, you've got an hour to get out, or something that's a little bit more, this is definitely for you.
Yeah.
We
were getting those as well. So we did get the text messages.
Yeah.
So there were those as well.
Yeah.
But you're right. It was going, even those were pretty relentless. You know, there was a lot of it.
But what's the answer?
So long too. It was 91 days or something. We were in, you know, up here.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. I know some people started to turn the app off, which, you know, I just considered not optional. So, but yeah, I mean, look, I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. I fear that this is just something that we're going to have to live with, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think so too. It's, but anyway, well, I'll tell you what the good news is, because it's hot. Like, there's no good news in fires. You know, at the end of the day, the only good news is things that come out of it, like your book, you know, where it's actually helpful to help people heal, and particularly kids, because those kids are going to be triggered by fire and by summers for the rest of their lives, you know, and they're never going to get rid of it. However, any books and stuff like what you've got, you know, is movies, anything that's going to help them, it just kind of lessens the impact a little and just helps them to process it. I think if you can process it, you know, you can move through it quicker. But the good thing, one good thing is that it was published with Australian Geographic, and within 1 week they did a second print run, which is really, that just goes to show how supportive everybody is, and how
it was pretty amazing. I think I think that took everyone by surprise, because we had only we'd only printed 2,000. We just did a small print run, assuming that it would be mostly people from East Gippsland that would buy it. But it certainly hit a nerve. So I had the launch, I think it came out, it was first on sale on the Monday, and I think I had the launch organised. Darren Chester launched it for me on the Friday. We had a whole lot of CFA representatives. We had people from all over the place that were able to come still. It was getting a bit tight at that point with restrictions. But by the time Darren was able to launch it, the book had already sold out. So I think it sold out on the Tuesday, having gone on sale the previous Friday or something like that. So they organised another print run and fortunately I had quite a few copies, so I was able to take copies to the launch to give to people there. But it was just, I think children don't need to be in East Gippsland to benefit from stories about heroes. And ultimately what this book is, although it tells real life stories of real life heroes, it actually just tells positive stories that come out of any fire situation. So in my case, it was the Pay It Forward scheme. There are a couple of kids from Sarsfield, teenagers, who lost their house and then went and volunteered to build fences for Blaze Aid. There are the 2 police from Bairnsdale Highway Patrol who rescued an injured kangaroo and then drove lights and sirens through the fire to get it to a wildlife carer to save its life, and clearly had been doing the same with people before that. It's you know, Dale up in Malakuta, who used his boat to go and rescue some campers that he knew was stranded or would be really critically endangered by a fire front on a remote stretch of beach out from Malakuta. It's about Patrick, who went into the bush afterwards and rescued koalas from bush that had been burnt out near Malakuta. It's all of that. There are just so many of those stories. And I think the thing that was really overwhelming after the fires, and I know you've pointed out that you struggled to find a way that you could help. Everyone was so generous and so wanting to do something for us all up here that, you know, they actually had to stop people from visiting and sending donations because there was too much. There was nowhere to store it, and people didn't need it. It was, you know, the generosity was overwhelming, and that was international. It was coming from everywhere. You know, all the farmers who'd been struggling through drought for years were sending all their hay to East Gippsland for the farmers who'd lost everything up here. I mean, it was pretty amazing, and there were just so many heroes that really, I think really the book has struck a chord because people also are looking for positives at the moment. I think they want things to be good. They want people to be nice. They want to know about good things happening in the world. So as well as allowing children to talk about the fires or encouraging children to talk about the fires, and that's happening, I've had really positive feedback from friends who've got small children, and also a friend who's a clinical psychologist who is just thrilled that there's this tool to help. I think as well as allowing kids to talk about the fires, it's allowing kids who even aren't impacted by the fires to see other positives. So I think that's just my guess, but I think probably this was just a book that happened at the right time.
Oh, I think it's a bit more than that. I think you're underplaying it, but I think it's but exactly what you're saying. You know, it's the good news. We need so much more good news, you know, because and nobody saw any good images from those fires straight away. You know, it was horrible. And isn't it amazing how people do want to help? People do want to be heroes. People do want to be generous. You know, people do want to be kind. But isn't it a shame that it takes a tragedy, you know, to actually bring that out in people? And I don't know whether there's no opportunities or, you know, whether we feel like we just can't be going around doing random acts of kindness. I don't know what it is, but I think we can. And it just is such a shame that, you know, it takes that kind of thing to make it happen. And but you said that aid was coming internationally, but, you know, and that's wonderful in itself. I think that the Australian spirit, though, is, you know, we there's the things I don't like tall poppy syndrome. You know, we knock each other down, and, you know, that there's all that kind of stuff. And she'll be right, and, you know, we get away with stuff, that inappropriate stuff we shouldn't get away with because we're just, you know, Aussies and that sort of shit. But I think at the end of the day, when there is a tragedy, the way Australians do come together, you know, to help each other is, I think it's unmatched. I think it's phenomenal. You know, it's.
Oh, look, we certainly saw it after the fires, and I'm sure we've seen it after plenty of other tragedies too. I think, unfortunately, I'm not entirely convinced that that's what we've seen during COVID. I think there has been a little bit more each for themselves with the COVID outbreak. But, you know, without getting into all of that, let's stay on the positives. I think, you know, the fire's positive, and it's positive that eventually we'll be out of this pandemic. Let's look at it that way.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree about COVID. I think it's just a matter of survival at the minute, which is unnecessary, but I think people have just gone a bit bloody mad.
It's the other way.
I cut you off.
No, they've just gone a little bit the other way, I think, but that's okay. We can remember that there are times when everyone's brilliant and they all pull together.
Yeah, I think the whole world's gone a bit bloody crazy at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I think too, I mean, one of the things that, I mean, this book, as I mentioned, was published with support from a grant, and the real positive that also came out of that, it was the One Good Community Wellbeing grants were actually to promote community resilience and wellbeing, and because of that, we've been able to donate 500 of the copies of the books to local communities. So that was something that we were really thrilled about. We negotiated that with Australian Geographic, and I've actually worked out the list. Bushfire Recovery Victoria is actually helping me with the distribution. We've got the list of where they're going to go to. It's mostly schools and libraries, community centres, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, each time we go to organise the distribution, we get locked down. They haven't actually been distributed yet, but they're all in my garage ready to go.
Oh,
They will
God.
eventually. I was really pleased about that. And the other thing that we've been able to do is donate. There's not a lot of money in children's books.
No.
So I did tell them to manage their expectations about actual figures, but we are donating 25% of the proceeds as well to the Gippsland Emergency Relief Fund. So they've already got their first check, I believe. So I was quite pleased about that as well, because they really do great work in Gippsland during all of these emergencies.
Yeah, they really do. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, hopefully it just keeps selling and selling and selling, because it's not the sort of book that's got a shelf life, because it's about goodness, it's about heroism, it's about how do we do good things for the community. That's never going to die. Well, I hope that's never going to die out. But I think it's.
I hope not.
No, we need it. God, we need it more and more. When you were talking about all these local heroes and you were naming them, and we didn't see a lot of them on the TV. We saw some, but they weren't sort of. Some were flagged as heroes, but some we just saw like part of the chaos, I guess. Like the guys going out in their boats, and you didn't sort of see, hey, this is Dale, he's a hero because he saved these people. It was just, you saw the footage of the boat going out. And did you struggle, because as you say, there's a science to kids' books and you've only got X amount of pages. Did you struggle with too many heroes? Like, I'm sure there were.
I think the thing that we had, there are a lot of the same sort of heroes. So it's difficult to pinpoint one or two. That was the thing. We needed to get the mix right. And I was really conscious that we all love the CFA. We all know that the CFA are heroes. They're heroes every summer. And frankly, they're probably heroes all year round. Yeah. It's just summer that we're very aware of them. I think what we wanted to also show were people like the DELP crews that were going in before the fire and rescuing critically endangered species and taking them to safety, so that they could be released again when it was safe. I wanted to also, Parks Victoria, who were flying overhead and reseeding and surveying damage. Yeah. There were just a lot of those sorts of heroes that we also wanted to showcase. So I think the thing that I did find it a little difficult to have left out some of the high-profile heroes in having to include, or really wanting to include, the heroes that we weren't thinking about. Yeah. One of the things that really struck me during all of this, my partner works with the police in Bairnsdale, and I subsequently, as a result, have quite a few police friends, and I'd gone out to dinner with one of them after the fires. She was living around the corner, and she was saying how absolutely awful it was for her having to stop people at the checkpoints from going to save their pets. Yeah. And so, we don't think about that. You might think police are heroes, or you might just think it's a cop in a car stopping you from doing something that you want to do. But what you're not thinking about is the emotional impact on that person and how gut-wrenching it also is for them. And they're the ones that were going in and clearing towns beforehand, basically to make sure that everyone was out, or that if people hadn't survived, that they were the ones that found them before other people did. There are an awful lot of those stories that I was just hearing day in, day out. The fear and the heroism and the genuine emotion. I think the thing with a lot of our heroes, and when I talk about these heroes, I'm talking about the heroes that work in this day in, day out. They're paid. The firefighters, the police, the ambos, the emergency services, the DELP crews. We're forgetting that a lot of those people actually were evacuated themselves. So their own houses, their own pets, their own families were all under threat at the same time as they were working 12-hour shifts, for 30 days straight, quite a lot of them. So I think that was the sort of heroism that we probably didn't include that we could have. And I have actually tried to mention some of that when I've talked about the book, because I just think that people don't realise that this is the sort of stuff that these people do day in, day out. They really are heroes, you know.
Yeah. 100%. I can't even imagine the stress for them, you know, particularly I've got to evacuate other people, yet I know my house is on fire. Yeah, you know, and I or my you know, I'll have to leave my horse, and that just break. I can't even see. I just tear up every time thinking about it. I can't even imagine the.
And it was very real, you know. It was,
Yeah.
and it was very real, and it was for a very long time. And you know, a lot of those little towns as well. When the book first came out, one of the first places that we went was up to Buchan, so that I could give a copy of the book to Ray, the local cop up there, and the Buchan pub, who'd kept their doors open.
Yeah.
You know, there are just so many. A lot of these places have just got one police officer or two police officers. They know everyone. You know, I think Victoria Police actually did a fantastic series of videos after the fires about the involvement of their members in these small towns. Cane River's tiny, you know. They stayed up there. You know, they really do. This is not, it's not an 8 hour a day, 5 day a week job for the people that are working and paid to work in these bushfire and emergency situations. So I think that really struck me very, very hard. Yeah. During all of it. And I think the other thing that you forget too is that these people all have accesses to radios for work. So, you know, they're actually hearing in real time the danger and the trauma that's happening in their own communities, you know, when they're quite often at work or evacuated.
I don't know. I couldn't do that job. Like, you know, I have so much admiration for, and particularly CFA, but all of them, you know, it's like, I don't know how. I look at some of those, I saw some footage, you know, of the trucks from the guys themselves within the truck taking the, and I think I'd have a heart attack. Like, I honestly think that I'd be that bloody scared, you know. They are.
Well, I know that they're all very well trained, but there's certainly, you know, I think in the case of Wairua, obviously our fire brigade at Wairua was, had been working really hard for a very long time. But on the night of the fire, they were actually ordered to put the tankers away, and it was about saving lives. And they weren't, you know, everyone was evacuated from the area. So they weren't, I think then they all went to their own homes and stayed to try and fight their own homes, but to save their own homes and their own families. In Wairua, in fact, everyone ended up getting evacuated down to the community hall, and I think they then fought to just keep everyone alive and safe in the community hall. And I know those sorts of stories were coming out everywhere. I think the same thing happened at Buchan as well. Yeah.
I don't remember which hall it was, but I remember seeing footage of that, you know, that just everyone trying to keep this one hall. It was the fire station, I think, where everyone was trying to, at the fire station. No, maybe I'm wrong. But anyway.
I'm not sure where that was, but I'm sure it happened because it was happening all over East Gippsland.
Yeah, some amazing stuff. But I absolutely love this, and I love that. Well, I hate that we have to be faced with this. It is, we all know Australia, we all know what it's like, you know, we live here, we particularly Gippsland, the droughts, floods, fires, like we know we live here, and we know that that's what we can expect. But it doesn't mean we like it. It doesn't mean we cope well with it. You know, and you can never get over the trauma. But the fact that people like you and others have done something positive, you know, just to try and relieve some of the stress. The stress will never go away. People are always going to be impacted by this ongoing triggers and, you know, that sort of stuff. But anything that comes out that is going to be helpful, and particularly for the kids, because, you know, we want our kids to grow up as functional adults, you know, that have a happy and meaningful life. And, you know, if some of their stress isn't dealt with, you know, with things like your book, you know, it makes it triply hard for the poor buggers to manage. So I absolutely applaud you for what you've done. And you may at times think that it's not much, and it's just I just did my little bit, but every little thing that happens like that is a piece of the puzzle, that's just mending people and putting people back together again. And I think it's so valuable.
I do feel super proud of it. I don't mean to, undercook it. I do think the success is, I think there is a lot of luck in it. I do think that. However, I do think it's also a very good product. And I think Karen Erasmus, the illustrator, is brilliant, and she's done a really beautiful job with illustrating it. But I do also really think it is a product of its times. Like it's the perfect time for this sort of little book to come out. And I'm kind of hopeful the next ones are too. The first one off the rank, I've written a series of 3 about my rescued greyhounds.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
The first one, Albert the greyhound who loved to run, is actually the true story of the first greyhound who we adopted, who scaled our 7-foot fence at Newman's Arm and was on the lam for 9 months, for 9 weeks, while the whole community rallied together to try and get him back, and we did eventually get him back. So that tells that story. It's the nervous, the anxious rescued hound who eventually finds his happy home. So I'm doing those. I'm using the dogs as my inspiration, and they're a lot happier, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there will also be one about Teddy who farts his way around the world.
Yes, but
I'm saying that will be a true story too.
They're the sort of books that are fun, particularly with animals. Kids love reading books about animals, and then they imagine themselves in that story. And I hope they're really successful. I really do, because there's nothing quite as nice as bringing joy and pleasure, to a kid, and to helping them, I guess, maintain their childhood. We've got social media and all sorts of stuff at the minute. Well, it's never going away, but it bombards them, just constantly bombards them, and it draws them away from being a kid, and they miss a lot of that innocence of their childhood. And I think that these kids' storybooks are just ways for them to sort of get back into that space and, to play in the imagination space. And I think it's wonderful. I think you can't go wrong, and I'm so glad you're doing it. I'm glad it's pushed you into a different area.
Oh, I love it. I'm really, really challenged and stimulated by it. And because it is such a science, I really had no idea how much work went into it, Yeah. Seriously, the first of the Greyhound books is now up to 22 drafts.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's not submitted yet. It's close. It's at the final editing stage, but that's how long it's taking.
Wow. And are they going through a publisher?
Laneway Press. So yes, there's a publisher on board in Melbourne. So and I believe that Karen, who did the illustrations for Heroes of Black Summer, will be illustrating the Greyhound series as well, which I'm absolutely delighted about, because she does the most beautiful animal illustrations.
Yeah,
it'll be a very different style. It's a different style of book, but I can't wait to get this series out into the world. I really can't. And if there are so many crazy greyhound owners like me who hopefully like and recognise the quirks of the greyhound breed, they're very strange dogs. Yeah. They're the dog that you get when you really don't want a dog, you just want a cat or a couch potato.
Yeah, I know so many people who have rescued greyhounds, and they reckon they are the best, the absolute best dog. And they're, it's a shame that they're it's a shame that they're bred to be treated so shitfully, and that's my opinion about that. But thank God there's greyhound rescue places, and thank God there are people who don't see them as savage bloody animals that walk around killing rabbits and God knows what. They're absolutely beautiful dogs, and I guess the more people that have got them like you, and the more stories that come out about them, the more people can actually see that they've been given a name that is not accurate to what they are, and we can, maybe more people will adopt them, which would be bloody fantastic.
Well, my two mostly spend their days upside down on the sofa with their legs in.
Yep.
Farting.
Yeah, that's what I hear most of them do. But you got to have several sofas if you've got it.
Yes, we had to buy a new sofa. We did actually buy a new sofa. Yeah.
I absolutely love it. And so, guys, you can get the Heroes of Black Summer at all good bookshops and online at major book retailers, and it's also available on the Australian Geographic site. And soon to be, you'll be able to get the Greyhound series as well, and I'm sure they'll be online at all good online bookshops and other good bookshops. But I've loved this. I've absolutely loved this. I'm so glad you've joined us. I have one last question, because this is the Get Off the Bench podcast to inspire people to take action. So what advice would you give anybody who feels like they have something to offer towards the community, like not just fires, just something to build their community, but feel like what they have to offer isn't good enough or it won't make a difference? What advice would you give them?
Oh, look, I just think back yourself. My personal view about that is that anyone that wants to give in any way can and should. And It doesn't need to change the world. It just needs to change one person. And if you reach that one person and it helps that one person, then your job is done, as far as I'm concerned. And clearly I'm thrilled that this book is doing well. And this is a not-for-profit project for us. So this is not about the money. This is about getting the book out there. I've done absolutely everything I can to let people know about this book so that kids can get it and kids can hopefully get some benefit from it. Yeah. And the fact that it is doing well and reaching all of those kids just makes me happier. Every little tiny bit of work that we've done towards this book has been paid off in droves, just because I know that there are at least a couple of kids in my world that have benefited. Yeah.
I'm 100% with you. It's back yourself, and every little thing we do makes a difference. And that last bit is the most critical. If something that you do helps one person, then that is successful. I think we've got terrible metrics for success, and our metrics should just be, did that thing I do help one person? And if it did, the success is nailed. It's
I read something recently, and I think it was a meme, and it was a little bit sort of shallow, but it was and I can't remember I think it was based on a philosopher, but it was someone saying to a little girl, why are you throwing that one starfish in to the water? Have you seen that one?
I have, and
it won't make a difference. There's a whole beach full of starfish that have been washed up on the beach, and she said it might not make a difference to all of those starfish, but it'll make a difference to the ones that I'm throwing back. And that is so true. It's absolutely true. If you help one person, and you know what, in this case it helped me. If I'm that one person, then it was worth doing.
100%. And often people will write books or do things because they couldn't find it anywhere else. That's another thing. I couldn't find that book I wanted, so I wrote it. Or I couldn't find that thing I needed, so I did it. And
you've done that. I think that was actually the other thing, the feedback that we got from Gippsland Primary Health Network of all of the One Good community grants that went out to the community, and it was millions of dollars.
Yep.
Ours was the only one that was just purely for kids. And I think a lot of people forget the impact on children of natural disaster, because there's been so much trauma. There's been a lot of talk about mental health. There's been a lot of talk about support for the community. But I think people are aware that kids are impacted, but there wasn't a lot of tailored support for kids. It was for the communities. And so this is a really good way. I'm really thrilled that this is able to help kids.
Yeah, I'm wrapped too. I think that we've got this attitude. Kids are resilient. They're tough. They're only kids. They don't understand the full impact. They'll get over it. You know, they're resilient. Bullshit. You know, we have to be better at supporting the kids because they don't talk about it. They play. You know, they go and they play outside and they do stuff, and we think they're not impacted, but they're terribly impacted by stuff. And well, I love that. I love that. I wish there were more that have had kids, but you know, at the end of the day, you've done your bit, and hopefully inspires more people to think about the kids as people are reading it. Hopefully they'll think, God, what else are these kids going through? You know, how else can I help? Hopefully it builds. Hopefully more stuff builds upon your book, you know, and the kids really do get a fair go from it. So I love it. I love it. So love it so much. Well, I'm going to put a link to buying the book in the show notes, but there's also heaps of other places. Just Google it. I've had a look at it. It is a fantastic book. The illustrations are fantastic. The story is so good, easy and good to read, and it's hopeful, it's bright, and it really makes you feel great about the people that live in our community. So fantastic. Now, where can people find you if they need to reach out? By the way, nobody reach out and ask her to write a book. She's not doing it. She's already writing her own books. So she's busy. But where can people connect with you if they need to?
I've got a website for business, which is cupcakecommunications.com.au. That's got contact details on it, but LinkedIn is probably the best place. I will eventually set up a website for my picture books, but I haven't got to that yet. I've been busy writing them instead.
Well, when you do, let me know and I'll add it to the show notes in case anybody goes back and listens to this, you know, in the future. So, but on LinkedIn, it is Kylie Miller. So and I'm going to have the links in the show notes. But Kylie, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this. It's just been wonderful to talk to you. And I just love I'm shaking my head, but I should be doing this. It's terrible how we do this, even though we genuinely mean it. But I'm really rapt to have spoken to you, and really rapt to have shared your story and to be able to have this conversation with you, because what you're doing is just, you know, we can't get enough of it. We really can't get enough of it.
Thanks, Karen. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Really lovely to be able to see you face to face. Once upon a time, we wouldn't have been doing that.
No, exactly.
Even on the screen, of course.
Yeah, I know. I started off my podcast not with Zoom, and then over COVID, Zoom has improved. You know, it's quality. So now we can do this. But honestly, I've really loved it, and you know, stay in touch and let us know how the other books go. And just thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thanks heaps. See ya.
Bye.